My name is Veronica Poblano. I'm from the Zuni reservation, and I do work with, I work in sterling silver and gold. I'm a jeweler, and I also do some art table sculptures. My father's name, Leo Poblano, he was one of the first fetish carvers on the Zuni reservation back in the 1940s and 50s. He passed on in 1959 trying to save million-dollar homes in Altadena, California. That's how he lost his life. And then my mother carried on the work after he passed on. And that's where I began to learn how to do carvings at a young age, and later on in the years I learned how to do fabrication of silver. And it wasn't until the early 90s I learned how to work in gold. I learned the craft of the sculpting of my traditional carved items from my mother and father. My father was at that time he wasn't famous, but he is now. But I learned the craft from my parents when I was small, just by watching. My father and mother used to do traditional designs where I adapted some of this work and learned from their craft at the time during the Hawika days in the trader era. But I always wanted to be different, so I took on another trend. But before that, my designs were mostly traditional, like using only turquoise and coral. I did a lot of work for a trader named Joe Tanner, which really influenced me by having me do a lot of Jesse Manungi's designs. I used to set some of Manungi's designs at teenage years, where I learned to perfect the stones of how to do inlay. From there on, I learned a lot of lapidary from my mother, which was very traditional, and learning the craft of making fetishes. Not very many people did any fetish carvings in those days. They were almost like ashamed to do the fetish carvings back in the 50s and 60s. There was just a handful of artists that would always do that, because silver was hard to come by, and material was still scarce in the village. It was the traders that brought in all the raw material that was able to have these Zunis carve and do inlay work. I work mostly in raw materials, to where you just have to work with the individual stones, whether it be coral or turquoise or any kind of mineral, and bring out the beauty within the stone. And this is how my father had taught me. He didn't actually set me down to teach me this work, but he would often talk about how he would do his work. And so did my mother. My father passed away when I was only 9 years old, and my mother continued. I learned on my own how to do silver work, fabricating all kinds of jewelry from start to finish, and learned how to do lapidary work as well. It took many, many years, trial and error, to do what I do, especially the stonework. The lapidary don't come easy. My children, Giovanna Poblano and Dylan Poblano. Giovanna is now married to Daniel Chatton, and she is a wonderful bead artist. She creates one-of-a-kind pieces, as well as her brother Dylan Poblano. And then Giovanna's husband, Daniel Chatton, also works, and they do collaborative pieces together, but they're all one-of-a-kind. And after all these years of creating what we do, my children has had a lot of interest in how my work has become, and so I have my daughter and my son and my son-in-law continuing this legacy of my father, because I know my father would have wanted to continue this if his life wasn't cut short, but it is the legacy of his that we're continuing, and I hope to see my children perfect this art one day with their creation. I've leaned towards towards the more contemporary feel of art, creating my jewelry, but I also have the respect of the traditional because I grew up very traditional on the Zuni reservation, and that's where all the modern, the very traditional designs came into play that taught me how and appreciate where I come from. And the modern era is where the contemporary designs come from. And these are ideas that I dream of, or through my travels, I adapt these by just looking at landscapes or buildings or even the water, the oceans bring me a lot of energy, real good energy to create how I create. I don't use any other people's ideas to complete my projects. It's always, given to me through talent, or how we're supposed to create as artists should be. When you're an artist, you create from your mind, and that's how we do. And everything that I create is of one of a kind.
Well, it's nice because you guys have this breeze. When you're next to it, it's called Dancing with the Stars.